Picture this. 50,000 drunk Romans cheering while two sweaty dudes in armor try to kill each other with swords. No pause button. No mercy. Just steel-on-steel action and one unlucky guy bleeding out for entertainment. Some gladiators were slaves, sure, but others were volunteers. Yep, people chose to risk death for fame, food, and maybe some clout. They even had stage names like the Thracian or the Murmillo, which sounds cool until your face is introduced to a trident. After the fight, the emperor decided if the loser lived or died with a thumb. Imagine your life depending on someone's thumb. Roman Yelp reviews were brutal. This was WWE meets Squid Game, except the pain was real and the retirement plan was being buried in sand. Welcome to the OG blood sport. Take one lion, a bear, a crocodile, and a rhino. No, this isn't a bad joke, and toss them into an arena with a guy holding a stick. That's Venatio. Romans imported wild animals from every corner of the empire, Africa, India, the Middle East, just to watch them die for fun. And the crowd loved it. Lions mauled prisoners, elephants crushed men like grapes, and sometimes animals fought each other like some twisted Pokemon battle. One emperor, Titus, killed over 9,000 animals in one event. Animal Planet would have had a heart attack. Oh, and don't get attached to the cute ones. Even giraffes were slaughtered. It wasn't sport. It was a live-action horror zoo with fur and fangs flying everywhere. If you were a Roman and didn't like this, too bad. It was the hottest ticket in town. So, the Romans invented barbecue. Human barbecue. They tie prisoners to wooden poles, cover them in oil, and set them on fire in front of an audience. The smell? Probably awful. But for Rome? Primetime entertainment. Sometimes, they upped the chaos. They'd light animals on fire and let them loose to charge the prisoners. Flaming bulls. Not even kidding. This wasn't just punishment. It was a fire show straight from hell. The crowd cheered like it was a fireworks display. The condemned? Well, not so thrilled. And if you're wondering why no one stopped this, because Romans thought it was justice. You steal, you burn. You rebel, you roast. It wasn't about mercy. It was about making a point. A very smoky, screaming, terrifying point. Imagine turning a sports stadium into a water park, and then flooding it with blood. That's Naumachia, Rome's version of live-action Pirates of the Caribbean, minus the happy ending. They flooded the Colosseum, yes, flooded it, and had real ships with real prisoners fight naval battles, all for show. If you drowned, too bad. If you survived, congratulations. You now get executed anyway. These weren't trained sailors, just terrified men given oars and swords and told, good luck, hope you float. Even swimming wasn't safe. Archers were posted to shoot anyone trying to escape. It was Titanic meets gladiator combat, but with no lifeboats. Rome really said, let's kill people, but themed. Rome loved two things, storytelling and killing, so they combined them. Prisoners were cast in mythological plays, but there were no special effects. If the story said the character got eaten alive, the prisoner got eaten alive. Playing Icarus? They'd actually launch you with wings, and then you'd crash. Prometheus? Get strapped down and let birds eat your guts. Yeah, theater kids today don't realize how good they've got it. The crowd watched, clapped, and sometimes laughed. It was like Shakespeare meets Mortal Kombat. And these actors? Just criminals dressed in dollar store cosplay, sentenced to die in character. This was Rome's version of Netflix originals. Violent, dramatic, and probably canceled after one episode, because the lead died. Okay, here's the deal. You get no weapons, no armor, and no chance. Now fight this lion. That was the setup. Sometimes they'd even strip you naked, just to make the screams echo louder. Criminals, slaves, and anyone the emperor didn't like were thrown into the arena with wild animals. And the animals were starved beforehand, just to be extra spicy. The audience placed bets. Will he lose an arm or a leg first? While casually munching figs. Some prisoners tried to run, some curled up in a ball, some even prayed didn't help. You were lunch. Occasionally, one guy would land a lucky punch. Crowd loved that. But 99% of the time, dinner was served. What if death, but make it funny? Rome had dark humor down to an art. They staged fake weddings that ended in real executions. Or hired clowns, who were just prisoners in funny clothes getting eaten. Think Looney Tunes, but you die at the end. There were skits where a guy played a character who gets stabbed, and surprise. The stab was real. Romans laughed. The actor screamed. The lines between theater and torture blurred so hard, Shakespeare would have cried. It was ancient stand-up comedy, except nobody stood up at the end. Even death had punchlines. Sick, twisted, but hey, at least they were committed to the bit. Equality in ancient Rome meant everyone got thrown into the arena. Women, dwarves, and even children were made to fight for sport. It was less girl power and more please don't die. They weren't trained. They weren't ready, but they were entertaining. Sometimes they were pitted against wild animals, sometimes each other, just for the crowd to giggle. There were even theme fights like Amazon versus Tiger. Romans found it hilarious, until someone got disemboweled. It wasn't about skill. It was about novelty. And if you didn't die today, you came back tomorrow for a rematch. Rome didn't discriminate. It just killed creatively. Let's make a brutal death match more fun by blindfolding everyone. Prisoners were thrown into the arena with weapons and no vision. They swung wildly, stabbing the air, the ground, sometimes themselves. It was like a violent version of pin the sword on the loser. The crowd roared watching men stumble around like angry toddlers. It sounds ridiculous until someone gets impaled by accident. And the best part? You never saw it coming. Literally. Sometimes they'd spin them first just to mess with their balance. It wasn't a battle. It was a panic attack in 4D. One wrong step, and it's game over. For laughs. Brutal, dumb, and 100% Roman approved. Yep, even kids weren't safe. Rome trained child gladiators. Little kids, some under 10, to fight in front of roaring crowds. Don't worry, they usually used wooden swords until someone got brave and swapped them for real ones. It was like Gladiator Jr., except the trauma was real. Some fought animals, so were paired up to battle each other. All of them, scared out of their tiny minds. It wasn't always to the death, but injuries, fear, and humiliation? Definitely. The Romans called it cute. Historians call it horrifying. Childhood back then wasn't crayons and cartoons. It was swords and screaming. Welcome to ancient Rome's daycare. Population, terrified.